easy to do that, right? But when you actually go in and actually look what's happening in a reference, sometimes as the foot plants, where that the hips might be at its highest point, the foot plants, you might get a little kink in the curve. So I would definitely recommend going in and trying to dirty up the curve a little bit. Not for no reason, you know, it has to make sense. It has to be doing what's in the reference. But again, this is like, you know, training your eye to improve and really kind of really try and see stuff that, you know, what's the word? You're not just going through the motions and just deleting stuff and making a nice clean curve for the sake of it, because, you know, that's what you learn in school, right? It's about going in and seeing what you can find in the reference and seeing how you can add it in your curves. So, you know, if I added a key here, maybe his head might be getting pushed onto the ground, but I might have a key there, and then I might have this one here, and then it might, you know, you might get a jitter. Whoops. You know, just finding stuff like that. So I'd do a pass, clean the root. I'd do the hips, the chest, and then the head. And then I'd do a pass where, if I show you guys, so this is my pass where I did that. So I just got that working nice and clean. You know, I'm trying to get the squash and the stretch, the rotate in the chest and the hips. Again, it's not just about following a reference, it's about knowing what animals do. You know, obviously, you know, if you look at from above, and if an animal reaches, you're going to rotate your chest in Y. Yeah, so knowing how it's important to, I think, to do cycles with creature stuff, because it teaches you a lot on curves and really what happens. Having rotate X, like if you can see now, there's rotate X happening when they're running. So, you know, if I didn't know that about mechanics, I wouldn't have put that in a reference. I wouldn't have put that in my animation based on the reference, because maybe I wouldn't have seen it. So it's important to go away, do your homework, and then, you know, and then do a reference test, if that makes sense. And then I do a pass where I hide the front, so I just show the back legs and just make sure they're working. It's weird when you look at it like that. And then when I was doing this, I was noticing things like, you see that little half step? So it kind of steps down and then comes back. Now in the reference, it's weird. Like when you actually look at it, like you would think the curve would be nice and clean like that. But it actually, if you was to track the arc of the foot, it actually went back and then down. Right? So it's really weird. And it's almost like a half step like that. But finding all these little nuances and, you know, the little nuggets that really help it. So if you imagine that on a big scale, I'm just doing this for 1 foot. But if you imagine doing it for the whole scene, it's quite, it helps train my eye. So now I did it for the front. This was you know, this is a previous polish, by the way. This isn't like the final one. This is another trick I learned. You know, we all know what bouncy balls are like. When I was on Lion King, I can't remember who I learned this off, or if it was just something I found on the internet and then I just applied it. But I hid my character, and and then I just attached spheres to the hips and the chest. And I know it sounds like stating the obvious, but I thought my character had weight, and it weren't until I showed the bouncy balls that I realized how off the weight was. And then I started to really you know, drop those curves. When the foot planted, I really sort of exaggerated that down motion, so you know, you got more of a spring. And then when I showed the character again, I was like, wow, oh my god, that makes a massive difference just doing that. So it's a really useful trick. But you know, this is further on in the process.
Did you turn on the legs with the spheres then as well?
You can do, but you know, to start off with, I would just treat them as two bouncy balls.
Sure.
You know, you don't want to go too far away from what's happening. I'm talking like fractions of the curves, you know. So when it should be down like that, I wouldn't push it down any further, because then you're going to get bent legs. And I wouldn't push it higher, because, you know, but I've definitely changed the curve, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, I would show the legs. Just, you know, I'll toggle hide and show, hide and show. What else? And then I did. I think I did a tail. Oh, there's a distance change, I think. So I think this is my distance change where I changed it in blocking, but no, there was one in late on in polish as well, but I can't find that file.
There's a question from Casey Annan. What's your usual way to deal with big notes late in the process, especially in production?
To deal with notes.
Yeah, late in the process. So I guess closer to the end, or when it's a bit more finished and polished.
Yeah, so this is a good point, right? So you're always going to get that. Obviously, so this is the industry we're in. The beauty I had with this is I didn't really have that. So, you know, I showed friends and they would give me polishing notes, but there was no major big changes. So this is more of a test for me to improve my eye. But, you know, when you're in a studio dealing with notes, you're going to get, you know, heartbreaking changes sometimes, and you just got to kind of deal with it. The one thing that I've learned with this is to treat your character like a toy, and don't be afraid to delete keys on the legs, you know. So if you've got a character that a proxy rig where you can hide the legs, and you get a change from your director saying or the client saying can we shift the timings? Can we make that run a little bit quicker? Can we make the gate a little bit further? Can we have I don't want them fighting there. Can we have them running at the same point, but can we move the fight over here? So you will get things like that. So if I was to get a note like that, I would hide the legs, or I'd work on one character at a time. I would hide the legs, and then I would just treat it like, you know, I'd move my character around as if I'm not moving a toy, and then see how messed up the legs are. So the legs will be out there, right? And then I would just show the front legs, and then I would go into my graph editor, and I'd try and I think it's the translate X. You know, you want to try and move them back in as much as you can. But you will be, you know, you'll have to delete keys. And I think what I'm trying to say is, you know, just try and be a lot looser with your workflow. And I think by having, you know, hiding stuff, if I'm moving a character around and I haven't got to worry about the legs, I'm not caring so much what's going on. Whereas if I'm moving a character around and I can see the legs doing this behind, I start freaking out and going, oh my God, I don't know, right? You know? So how I deal with changes just really depends on the note. Now, not many people, you're going to get to that point where you've really polished it and they're going to say, I like it, but let's have it over here. You know, that will happen, but, you know, you're not going to get that as much when you're that far down the line. Hopefully there shouldn't be that many surprises because they'll have seen it over and over and over. But then you do get someone that comes in and says, hey, let's change it all. But you just got to be prepared for that. It just depends on the note, really. Depends how drastic it is. If you're working with one character, two, if they're not interacting, it's a lot easier. You know, if you just, oh, let's move this creature, can we have it over here, or can we have the gate bigger? You know, you're not going to get crazy notes like that. Most notes are doable, you know, gate changes or timing changes. Yeah, I hope that helped. That's a really long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. A lot of times it's just quicker, simpler, easier to delete a section and redo it. And you'll find you do it in a fraction of the time.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, sometimes, you know, yeah, a quicker answer to that is sometimes you do have to delete a section and then start again. And again, working loose, yeah, it's a lot easier to do. Yeah. Yeah, I think that covers that. I think with polish, oh, let me just show you the facial quickly. So the tail pass, again, the tail pass that I did was, where's my Maya? So the tail pass, I was really, it was really, what's the word? I got my foundations in blocking, right? So I had my key poses. Now with lion tails, the way they move are really sort of independent to you know what they're doing, right? So it's not like a horse where they're running along and the tails do this, or even, you know, other animals where the tails might be stiffer, but they still kind of got that overlap. With lion tails, they're more like ropes with their own brain. That's the only way I can describe it. Is they're really weird. They're kind of, you know, lead with, you know, almost the end, and it's just they're really difficult. So they're more of a pose to pose, you know. That's why it was important I got that in my blocking. So when I polished it, I just went, it was really a painstaking process where it was like when it was in the air, it was frame by frame, just making sure, you know, I was getting this, the spacing was working and stuff. When it was on the floor, I had to have it in IK. I did try and counter it, but it was just a nightmare. And then when I got right to the end, I found out the rig had an IK rig, and that frustrated me even more. That was the hardest bit for me for this whole test, really, was getting the tails looking how they, or as close to how they should. They're not perfect, but you know what is. Toes, you know, I do a foot splay pass. I find with toes, you know, you really don't want to go over. You really don't want to go overboard with toe splays. It's very easy to. Let me switch this to high res. Of course, I'm in my layout pass. Where are we? Where are we? This is my last file. I'll show you this one. So when you're doing a toe pass, especially if you want to make it look realistic, if you're doing a you know, a realistic test, you want to don't go overboard with it. You know, it's really easy to just do this. And again, looking at what the reference is doing, you want to exaggerate a little bit because obviously you want to be able to see it, right? But you don't want to go from this to this because obviously it then starts to look animated. But you obviously want to do it so that you can see it. So, you know, if you actually look at cats when they plant their feet, their toes don't actually splay too much. But obviously in CG, we need to exaggerate it enough so that we see it, but you don't want to exaggerate it too much so it doesn't look believable. So it's just, again, it's finding that balance and that fine line. It's the same with plants and peel-offs. When I do a shot where I've got a character walking or something and I'm not using a cycle, for me, especially with cats, what sells the most when you're doing a shot, obviously apart from the weight and stuff, is your peel-offs, you know, your free pose peel-off. So you've got that, and then you've got that, and then you've got this kind of like weird S shape on where the wrist leads. And then you've got this, right? So, but then when the foot comes through and then it plants, you don't want this over-exaggerated flop of the toes. You want enough so it reads, but you don't want this over-exaggerated flop of the toes. And the other thing that I see as well, when you're doing the arcs of the feet, that I think animals like deers and horses are more inclined to just go up and over. But usually an animal would just drag their feet. So you'll see the arc would go like that. So it goes up and then down and up and over. So it go like that, if that makes sense. So finding things like that in your curves and your reference will take your shots to the next level. And then, so that's the tail, the toes, the ears was quite fun, but I had to do crazy work on the face and the ear rig because I had to rig this. So the ears I found really difficult to rig, skin, especially because I had to do the high res one. The high res was super, super dense because long ago I wanted to do a muscle pass, and where I was learning Ziva VFX, this guy came on board and said, oh, I really like your test. I'd like to help with a muscle. That's Chris Makawana. And, you know, he took it over and he'd done an amazing job. But because I knew that I had muscle down the line, I was talking to several people and they said, you know, do a really high res dense version of your final mesh. And that helps with the facial. I got nice wrinkles and stuff, but the ears were a bit problematic, you know, because the skinning on a high res mesh is a bit of a nightmare. So I show you my facial pass, and then I think we'll probably wrap it up for any questions. So this is, you know, another topic, but this is further down the line. I realized that I had to have a skeleton for the muscle stuff. So when I was updating my rigs, I had the skeleton built in the rig. And to be honest with you, it really helps. It helps finding problems in your scene, because obviously when you've got your skin character like this, there might be a pop or a glitch or something like that, but when you've got your skeleton on the show, like if I show you this, where is it? If I've got this guy on show, you can actually see what should be going on, right? And you can see if there's any pops. Now this is super slow because I think this is like my final pre-muscle version. So I've got, you know, everything in there. But let me show you quickly my facial. Show you on this guy. See, yeah, it's really high res, man. Where are you? Is it this one? Yeah. So the face rig just blend shapes, and because they weren't so up close, I wasn't too worried about making it ultra perfect. If I was to do it again on a closer up, you know, I'm going to revamp this face rig, but because they weren't too far, they were a bit far away from camera, wasn't bothered, and it's going to be covered in fur as well. So the face rig is pretty much blend shape driven. You can see how high that is, and that's when I think I showed someone this, and I was like, "Why the hell is that so high? Like, it's completely unnecessary." And it's purely because we wanted nice, you know, muscle definition and stuff. But yeah, for the you know, this is completely unnecessary. You know, even for muscle, really. But we, you know, it's trial and error. So the way I got around that is I've got a separate face rig, separate from the body, so that I can simply just work on, I can hide the body, I can have a face cam. I think it's this one. Oh man, trying to find it now. There we go. So that is my controls are basically controlling this mesh, which blend shapes are driven into this, and then I'm controlling this, which is then plugged into my main body. I can switch it. I haven't got a script yet, but I'm working on a simple script where I can switch it from just showing the face. So this would be in my face cam, and this would be bouncing around just with the face. All other geo would be off, and I would just be looking at this little dude here. And then my controls would be on this. I did do that at one point, but then when it got to the point where I needed to cash out the full body, then I switched it again. So it's a bit of a long-winded process to do it manually, so I'm not going to show you now. But because I only had to do that once or twice, I didn't yet come up with a script. So, but the way
you just have one blend shape, just from default, I guess, to angry.
No, I had loads. So basically, I had a snarl on the left, snarl on the right. I had a snarl in the middle. I had a blink, and then I had a compressed blink, and then I had out and in for the mouth, and I think that was about it. But if I was going to revamp this, I would do more snarl shapes here.
Sure, yeah.
Especially if I'm doing a closer up shot, which I am in my later one. So I definitely want that to look nice, especially where it's got the fur and it's kind of stalking its, you know, it's stalking its brother or his sister or his friend or whatever. So, you know, I definitely want a nicer face rig for that one. But yeah, it was just, you know, controls that go up and down. I do a draw pass first, just try and sell it. And then I do, you know, the major key poses. And to be honest with you, I didn't go too crazy with this because they're so far away from the camera. It was no point. I just needed to hit shapes because they're moving quite quick. The note I got at the end, I showed Dan, and the note he gave me at the end, he gave me some really good feedback to take it more away from the reference. So he was like, look, it's great what you've done. Let's see how far we can push it so it's away from the reference. Hence, you know, he gave me a note of adding a sneeze at the end, you know, ear flicks and things like that. There was one note where as it was going in for the bite, the reference, the cub that was biting was just looking directly forward. And Dan suggested that as it goes in for the bite, you know, have it lock onto the other cub, and then that read a lot better. So it, you know, it was good. He gave me some really good notes to plus the shot, but the nuts and bolts was already there. but yeah, with the facial pass, it was just main shapes really, and I'll be honest, I don't think I even did a lot of work easing into those shapes because they're so quick. They, you know, and then there is, like I said, that one of the hardest things about this test was the ears, because when they're running along, they're quite stiff. There might be a little bit of movement in the tips. But when they was on the floor and it was, you know, getting punched and rolling around on the floor, I really needed that deformation. So I really needed to be able to move the ear around. And because I'm not a rigger by trade, you know, I'm not perfect with anatomy. So I found it hard to work out where the pivots were in the ears. Like, do riggers have have their joints along the back of the ear? Did I have it in the middle? And then I tried this, I tried that. So I tried to experiment. Do I have 3 joints, 4 joints, 8 joints? So I did a lot of variations. But yeah, I think eventually I kind of got to where it needed to go to sell it. So yeah. And yeah, and I think that's it. And then I think the final version was
Do you need your sharing back? I don't know what happened there.
oh, has it come off?
Yeah, I think he jumped out of it.
Uh,
Oh yeah,
can you see it?
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, and obviously this is the finished version. This is with all the muscle jiggle, and you know, you can see in the belly, and the volume preservation on this guy when he's rolling around on the floor.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. You can see the face a lot clearer now too, and the eye direction and everything.
Yeah, I think with the yeah, I don't know what's happening with the textures on the face, on the eyes. I need to fix that, but that'll be fixed when it comes to render anyway. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this with all fur, and there's going to be dust kicking up on the floor and stuff. It's going to be pretty cool. And then with the whole sequence as well, you know, hopefully it's going to be quite a fun little sequence. So I think,
Good job.
yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, so has anyone got any final questions? Or
Yeah, do you guys have any questions for Anton? Do you, with your blend shape, did you use references to create your shapes? Because that's what you have to do, right? You have to kind of...
yeah, so I did look at reference, but it wasn't it was very hard to find reference for that. Like, there's hundreds of images of cubs snarling and, you know, playing, but to actually know what riggers put in is very difficult, because, you know, I'm not friends. I don't know too many riggers, so it's not like I can you know, it's not I can pick people's brains and say, oh, what would you do for this? Because I wanted to know what um a, a really high-end studio would do, and I didn't, so I had to kind of wing it with the face shapes and stuff. So all I pretty much know is snarl, and when they open their mouth, their outer lips, so kind of get that shape. So there's a couple of correctives, but yeah, I'll definitely push that when I do the next one. Yeah.
So you obviously did Lion King, right? And then did this.
Yeah.
So I guess you would have learned a lot from doing your personal stuff, which you would have.
Yeah. So yeah, this is why I do it. You know, I always like to push myself, and, you know, and push my eye. But when I've discovered new workflow tips, you know, it blows my mind when I learn new stuff. So yeah, it's cool to try and pass it on.
And Diego asked, do you have anything, well, he says thanks, and do you have anything about the Zebra working process?
I do, but it's probably another it's probably another talk. I could definitely message you privately. Like with Ziva, Ziva's all about cashing stuff out. So, you know, you would take your bone, the bones animation, and you cash that out, you bring it into another scene at bind pose, and you attach your muscles to it. You run your animation. So you apply blend shapes. So you got your animation cache of your skeleton. You bring it into a default scene. You apply that animation to this skeleton, and so that this one then becomes this one, right? And then the muscle is on top of it. So it's quite confusing to explain in like a few minutes answer. It took me a long time, and then when I eventually got it and I did a pass of muscle, I was really happy with the results. And then this guy comes along and steals my thunder and he says, "Hey, I'll do the muscle," which I wasn't complaining for. I wasn't complaining. So yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Actually, what was the name of that script you were using earlier? Was it JT or something?
JT locators, I think.
JT later. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, JT locators. And then the rotate order was ML rotate converter, a rotate order converter or something.
Yeah, does anyone else
Yeah.
have any last minute questions? Otherwise, we'll let Anton get on with his Cub Fight sequel animation. Do you have any? Well, I guess I'll ask you one last question then. Do you have any? I guess last bit of advice for just like animation students trying to get into the industry, because a lot of people are still trying to, bridge that gap and get in, even though they're working on personal stuff.
Yeah. I think the biggest advice I can give was to there's a lot of resources out there. And if you can't afford a school or a mentor, is to find obviously find reference if you're going to do a test. Like I always do tests. I always work on my personal stuff to try and kind of push myself and learn new skills and stuff. But you know, don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to push yourself. You know, it hasn't always got to be a walk cycle. You know, push yourself within your skill limits. But you know, look at reference, use reference, and I think the biggest tip I can give people is be more resilient and have a stronger chin in terms of accepting feedback. You know, go and get feedback. Don't wait until the very last second before you think it's final, and then you show everyone, you put it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then you get notes, and then you get really defensive over your work. So, you know, show stuff early and lots. But yeah, don't stop pushing yourself.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I guess I'll show everyone one last time your course. Share. So this is Anton's course, and it starts the 7th of June. So you can reach out to him if you want to learn more about this writing and what he went through. How long is this course anyway?
This is 15 weeks, so this is quite quite intense in terms of what's going to be going on. There's not just cubs; we've got other rigs in the pipeline. So you can choose. You know, you'll be you can choose what rigs you want to use, and you know what reference, and you'll be guided on how to, you know, how I went through it and whatnot. So yeah, there's lots and lots of content. There's lots of pre-recorded lectures, how I went through every step of the process, from spline blocking to layered to stepped. Yeah, it's quite it's going to be fun.
Cool. Good stuff. All right.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate everyone. Appreciate everyone showing up, and I hope it helps.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thanks for the script. That was great. And thanks everyone for attending as well. And we'll see you at the next one.
Awesome. Thanks again, Eddie, for everything you do, man. It's keep up the good work.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See ya.
All right.